which is why it's called super thermite, and made of nanoparticles.
And that's what they use, with just a thin caulking to separate the missile sections or rocket sections of an ICBM or a Saturn-type rocket. Now, also, they show the hot steel pouring out of the side, the molten iron from the steel being melted, and they say, oh, that's aluminum. But Jones and others have done the test, and it shows aluminum comes out white and flaky, doesn't keep any color for more than a second, and only a few feet. This is falling hundreds and hundreds of feet and staying yellow and then orange and then red. Only iron does that. And then separately, we have the videos from New York TV, the firefighters saying thousands and thousands of degrees above jet fuel, molten lava, molten steel and iron down in the pits a month after the collapse. 1,800-degree jet fuel can't do that. The firefighters are saying molten iron. Only molten iron can be caused by massive thermite.
Yeah, there's no iron in the building, first of all. There's iron in steel columns, of course, but it's an alloy. And what Dr. Jones finds is these previously molten iron chunks, which he's analyzed, are indeed not melted structural steel, because there's abundant manganese in them and very little chromium, too. So this is clearly another, an additional component that's not in building materials. And so where did it come from? Well, it could only come from thermite. Thermite's byproduct is molten iron. All of the evidence is supporting the control hypothesis theory.
Well, we normally take calls on the show, but I've been so busy with this information we haven't. But we'll take a few calls for Richard Gage straight ahead, 888-201-2244, 888-201-2244. In the final segment with our guest, he's almost for a full hour coming up Wednesday.
Direct from Austin, coast to coast, and in your face. You're listening to the Alex Jones Broadcasting Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, 2 program notes. On Tuesday's radio show, I'm going to have huge breaking news that I'm asking for all of you to join us in. Something very, very important. Huge, breaking, important news that you will be involved in. And it's big, biggest thing we've ever done. Coming up Tuesday. You don't want to miss that. We're going to have some foreshadowing, some idea of it in a post tomorrow at prisonplanet.com and infowars.com. But then look for it Tuesday. Also, there's a new film. It was the main selection, the winner of this year's South by Southwest, New World Order. And I'm the main featured individual in that. It's now out on DVD with an expanded extras available at Infowars.com. Of course, there's my 2 latest films, government-sponsored terrorism, Terror Storm, and the 9/11 Chronicles, all available at Infowars.com via the safe, secure online video bookstore shopping cart. We also have Richard Gage documentaries and all the great books, T-shirts, and materials that get the word out. I want to take a few calls for our guest coming up here, but in 3 or 4 minutes before we take some final calls, you'll have a full hour with less ads coming up on the Wednesday show. Professor Stephen Jones is also on. Other key points about this piece and this attempt to debunk 9/11 truth. I mean, if 9/11 truth wasn't important and wasn't exposing stage terror, the whole pretext the establishment uses for control, they wouldn't be trying to debunk you.
Yeah, this is true. This is good news. Let's take it as that, Alex. There's a serious attempt to make a very unscientific analysis to label us as conspiracy theorists and show. But I think it all backfired. I really do. It was so shoddy, as you suggest, that it can't hold water with thinking people. It simply can't. I mean, we have 800 architects and engineers now signed on to the petition. Virtually every architect and engineer who's at our presentation or reviews our DVD ends up going, oh, my God, well, I can't believe I didn't know about all of this. How come I hadn't heard about this? Of course, this makes sense. You're right. And they end up signing our petition. It's pretty extraordinary. I mean, we have incredible response rate, show of hands everywhere we go around the world.
Well, that's the big dirty secret, is that every time they do these shoddy hit pieces, it just wakes more people up. It's like they're saying the world is flat, we're saying it's round. They do TV specials saying it's flat. they're discrediting themselves. The question is, why do they keep doing it?
They have to respond somehow, and I guess they just don't do a real good job of manipulating. Maybe that's the best they're capable of. It's disturbing that I spend a half an hour to an hour presenting very detailed evidence for all of this stuff, and it doesn't get on. But I've learned to not take it personally and to almost expect it. And we think any exposure like this is better than none, particularly when they help us by doing such a bad job of it.
Let's play a short little clip here where they then spend the second half of the piece bumbling and babbling on National Geographic, saying this is what we want to believe and that we're basically delusional. Here it is.
Theories.
The reality is, this far out, no one has been able to provide a single piece of evidence that those buildings were explosively demolished. And the reason is they weren't.
By presenting this new evidence to the truthers, they and we might learn more about their theories, their beliefs, and perhaps most importantly, why they want to believe.
You take out some of those experiments you paid a lot of money for, but don't prove anything, you're going to have a lot of...
I mean, folks, it is a complete joke. Let's take some phone calls for Richard Gage. John in Louisiana, you're on the air. Go ahead.
How you doing, Alex?
Good.
How you doing, Richard? I would like to ask you, Richard, how long do you think that, because, nanothermite is very, very small, not very noticeable, how long do you think they could have been present in the towers?
It was painted on clearly, and we even know they say unconventional fireproofing was put on, but that's what one of the underwriters with Underwriting Laboratory said here on the show, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, Kevin Ryan has done some analysis indicating that there were indeed fireproofing retrofits in the floors above and below the point of jet plane impacts, which are different in each of the North Tower and the South Tower. So that's very interesting. He documents that in Journal of 9/11studies.com. Relative to your question about how long, this stuff's been available for about 10 years. We know for the last 9 months that there was an elevator retrofit going on, the largest elevator modernization in history, actually, where all the core elevators, the elevators in the core of each tower were changed out. They had 85 employees, in fact, from Ace Elevator scatter the morning of 9/11 after the first jet plane hit. They were supposed to stick around and help the first responders. But somebody, perhaps in the guise of an elevator modernization, could have had access to the core columns and beams in the building.
And they had all sorts of weird terror drills evacuating. Thank you, John. Finish up, Richard.
Yeah, so there was access there. So when we talk about who might have been able to do this, we have to say who had access to the building.
They also say, where's the det cord? We would have seen det cord. Well, FEMA was all secretive. Everything was blown into tiny pieces. There were all these maintenance shafts and maintenance floors.
We have timed devices that are very small and very high-tech now. You don't need det cord. This is wireless. This is wireless technology now.
Absolutely. Let's jam in another.